Tell me about Vertical Village and how you conceptualize and what brought you to it.
So very briefly, the way I'm conceiving a vertical village is like a residential community center. So a place where, but with a healthcare team or with access to a healthcare team. So a way whereby we bring neighbors together to support each other, and people will learn about healthy living, how to take care of their neighbors, but also have access to a team that would, a healthcare team that would come to the facility to do checkups on people, to provide health screenings. As we know, a lot of Americans suffer from 6 in 10 suffer from chronic diseases, a lot of which can be treated or dealt with by regular screenings. So anything that we can do to facilitate that happening, having mobile clinics, community clinics. So yeah, like a residential community center. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
So I should have asked you to introduce yourself.
Oh, yes. So my name is Mary Elizabeth Harmon. I am a caregiver. I became a caregiver when my father was placed on hospice. And the way that the Vertical Village idea happened was he and my mother were living in a senior community. And I actually lived with them there for a while. And during that time, I saw how there were very supportive practices that were happening there. So for example, health practitioners came to the community to serve the people. Meals were included in the room or with their rent. All the residents got free rides to and from to the store and to devotional services. There was a central meeting place where people could come together and do community building activities, whether that be arts and crafts, just different learning activities. But so that worked very well. However, there was also a little bit of a downside with the room and board, or with the food, because it wasn't nutritious. My parents ended up paying for over 1,500 meals they never ate. And because I was close by and my sisters were close by, we could fill in any of those gaps that my parents had in their care. So eventually what we decided to do was just to move into a standard apartment building. And in the process of doing that, my parents saved over $1,500 a month. So there were definitely some benefits to doing that. The energy of the place, just given the age diversity, was more lively. My parents' spirits both picked up. However, there weren't community building activities. So there was no kind of infrastructure to bring people together. And then also because my mother, the building wasn't very age diverse, my mom did lose some of that contact that she had with some of her peers, because she used to do sing-alongs and things like that. So she was part of the people who were bringing people in the community together. The other drawback was that I had to locate in-home services. And when you're working 24/7 on caregiving issues, it becomes very difficult to know what's in my community. I mean, it takes a lot of research to find those resources. And part of what I want to do with Vertical Village Alliance is to start creating a database whereby we can start consolidating that in-home care information so that caregivers and aging adults don't have to look so hard for that kind of information. So that's another part of what I see Vertical Village Alliance doing. That's how the whole apartment building, because when I was caregiving for my father, I was just very overextended, and it just seemed a little absurd to me to be dying a death by 1,000 cuts in a building full of people. And I had a feeling if my neighbors knew my situation, they would very gladly pitch in, and how things like running a quick errand to the store could make a really big difference to me if that meant I didn't have to stop what I was doing to go to the store and come back. It would have been, no big thing for other people. And so and one other thing was, previous to living in the building where I am now, taking care of my father, I did a lot of community building efforts in the condo where I lived in Atlanta. And all I did was hang up a sign in the mailroom saying, "Hey, folks, do you want information about the neighborhood and community building events?" And we had about 125 units in the building. I collected over 100 email addresses. So
Wow.
what that told me was that people were very eager to get to know their neighbors. They just needed a facilitating force to do that. And so I'm just very confident that if someone says, hey, folks, this is something that I want to do, sign up, send information, that people will sign on. And maybe I won't have, 85% people signing up, but even if you have a small percentage of people signing up, it's still enough to support other people, neighbors supporting neighbors.
How many people do you think it takes to get a program started in a community? And I assume the vertical, it assumes apartment buildings, but there can also be other naturally occurring communities where this could easily work within a zone. But
Yeah, very definitely.
how many people do you think it would take to make a difference in an older person's life?
Well, I think it could vary. So if you want to do it informally or formally. So one of the things that I'm working on now is to create what I'm calling tiny villages. And so those would be supportive communities of just 3 to 5 people. So for example, I have a neighbor, he has kidney disease, but he also has a dog. And sometimes he comes back from dialysis and he has no energy whatsoever. And so I can just run up and walk his dog. I've cooked him dinner before when he was just too sick to cook it. And so it was no huge burden on me, but it provided a big support to him. And that was just me, one person doing it. So I do think that if we all just kind of, hey, who's the one person that I can take care of? If each one just kind of took care of one, then one person can make an impact. But if you're thinking about a more formal village, what I've heard anecdotally from one of the people in Village to Village Network is that it takes about 8 to 10 people to kind of get things coalesced. So I guess it just depends upon how formal or informal you want to be about it.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's interesting. Do you, for example, well, have you formed a 501c3 or anything of that sort?
Okay, I have not formed a 501c3, but I am fiscally sponsored with a 501c3. So I can get tax deductible donations. So that's how I say that again.
Oh, I thought you could get tax deductible materials, but you can get donations as well.
Yes, you can get donations as well. And the advantage of me going that way is, first of all, there's costs associated with starting a 501c3. I've been largely unpaid for the last 5 years. And so this was a way that I was able to get that status. I applied for a grant in December. And so, we can see like, if I get the money, whereas if I were to go through the whole 501c3 formation process, I'd still probably be stuck in it. So right now I'm fiscally sponsored. And then as things progress, form my own 501c3, I'll just kind of decide then. But for right now, I'm fiscally sponsored.
That's very interesting because it shows how you can use a single 50. So each little unit of 2 or 3 or 4 doesn't need to form its own 501c if there's an umbrella at the top that people can use within the guidelines of the IRS. Very interesting.
Yeah, and the sponsor that I found, one of the reasons why I was very interested in them is one of the perils of being fiscally sponsored is that your sponsor owns your intellectual property. So that's something a lot of people don't know and you have to be really careful about. But I found a sponsor that lays no claim to intellectual property. And so I consulted with a lawyer before I signed on, and you can cancel at any time. And she said, if you hadn't found this particular situation, I would advise you not to go that way. But with this, I would say green light. So, this way you need 2 people. And I think I might see where you're going with this. And that is, you can even the informal villages can have a mechanism to get money to pay for, transportation services, say, for example, if people are transporting, somebody to the doctor, or if somebody needs some help with Medicaid. I don't know. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what all the boundaries are in terms of what they can sell, or sorry, what they can spend the money on, but it does create a mechanism whereby people can get funding.
Well, it also opens risk and liability management opportunities that I don't think even Village to Village Network has explored as deeply as they might, but it opens a whole lot of, you can have, for example, you can have an inter-insurance exchange, which is a lot of places, USA, you know, you're probably familiar with USAA. That's an inter-insurance exchange. Technically, all of the people who are members of USAA are contracted with everybody else in a common cooperative enterprise. And that's a mechanism that would be natural for a lot of the exposures of aging that's not been pursued. But there are a lot of other things, advantages to having a central agency that helps advance it. Let me ask Mark. Mark, what do you think of this idea? I know because you were in a CCRC, a continuing care retirement community, and changed your thinking. But do you think something like this could be workable?
Well, it depends a lot upon personnel. You know, the leadership of the group, I think, is so critical. Mary Elizabeth is a strong leader. I think it's a little bit optimistic to think that there's going to be a lot of strong leaders out there that are going to be committed to it. I mean, so I think it's going to be a grassroots issue that's going to be spotty in my projection, unless you start talking about dues and you start talking about, you know, some kind of financial wherewithal to hire somebody to make it so that the leadership has some kind of financial reimbursement of what they're doing. I think you're going to be based upon, it's sort of like retirees. You know, retirees are very volunteer prone, but they also tend to feel free to change their plans pretty easily. So it's, you know, it's got to be, there's going to be some issues in terms of longevity of some of these startups.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's, I view Mary Elizabeth as a leader. So, and I think a lot of people, so if we can get it, so all you need are 2 or 3 friends to get something going, and you've got this support, then you can do it. You don't need every local startup doesn't need to have that total leadership, and they can learn, but there's an opportunity for local leaders to emerge and to really do some interesting things with the fundamentals. It's like, you know, driving. It's nice if you want to drive from A to B. It's nice there's a highway there, and so and you don't have to be a highway engineer to make use of the highway. So I think that's great. But that's a lot of insight. That's one of the things that excites me about what Mary Elizabeth is doing. It just seems so workable. And I think it could really grow and change things. Donna, what do you think? What are your?
Well, let me play the devil's advocate for a minute. We talk all the time about, and believe me, I'm into neighbor helping neighbor, and I live in a CCRC, and we actually volunteer for that kind of program here to do some shopping for our buddies who can't get out and that sort of thing. Transportation to doctors when regular service isn't available, and so on. So I'm not adverse. What I continue to be concerned about is single individuals who are living alone, who spend the vast majority of their time by themselves. And aging in place probably has a place, but we do know that isolation is one of the biggest issues that we face. So then the question becomes, how is what you're proposing really any different than staying in a home and having Meals on Wheels delivered, other than you get some help? It still doesn't take away my initial concern that so many seniors remain in isolation, even though they have a modicum of help. Very concerned about that.
I would say that because people are co-located in a building, as in a vertical village, that would really facilitate dealing with the social isolation piece. So in fact, I think that a vertical village would work much better than a kind of the way that we think about villages being spread out. So, but what it would require, however, is some kind of programming. So we can't just say, oh, let people just kind of, naturally meet people. Because again, if people are in their houses, they're not going to naturally meet people. So
No, they
if we
don't. In
have-
fact, my experience has been that they remain isolated.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And it's not just somebody who lives there that needs to do it. I guess depending on the diversity within the building. If it's all seniors, it's going to be very, very different than if it's different folks living together. I don't know, but
Right. I'm
But in that
imagining it
sense-
being all ages.
okay.
Yeah, I think all ages can work, because I think age segregation is one of the problems that we have. So anyway, I think we've gone over time.
Yep.
Any closing thoughts, anybody? Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. Nice meeting you, Donna.
You can see how often I can get here on Tuesdays.
Well,
Take
I'm
care,
glad you
everyone.
did, but I think-
Bye.
Enjoy
Bye.
the week.
Bye. See
Bye-bye.
you all next week.